Boa tarde a todos. Esta sessão vai decorrer em inglês, portanto, a nossa conversa com o Peter Handke vai ser em inglês e, portanto, como não será muito prático, estamos a traduzir em português a cada momento. Queria só deixar este aviso no começo. Antes de mais, queria agradecer ao Paulo Branco, a organização do festival, que é por isso que o Peter Handke está cá, é um dos membros do júri. Temos, aliás, outros eminentes membros do júri presentes. E numa nota pessoal, confesso que é um bocadinho embaraçoso para falar a um auditório com presentes e futuros prémios Nobel da literatura. Mas vou só começar com algumas notas biográficas e mostrar, sobretudo, também alguns livros traduzidos em português. E estão muitos deles traduzidos em português, embora o Peter Handke escreveu quase 80 livros, talvez já mais de 80 livros, e eu trouxe alguns, se calhar alguns estão ali. Antes dos livros, vou só dizer que ele nasceu na Áustria, na Caríntia, filho de camponeses, de origem eslovena, esteve muito ligado à mãe, sobre cuja morte escreveu um dos seus livros mais impressionantes. E marcado muito também, evidentemente, pela Primeira Guerra Mundial, também viveu algum tempo, pela Segunda Guerra Mundial, também viveu algum tempo na Alemanha, estudou num colégio católico, estudou Direito e em 1966, com o sucesso do seu primeiro romance, abandonou os estudos e dedicou-se à literatura. Teve também algumas intervenções polémicas em relação ao mainstream literário austríaco da altura, o chamado Grupo 47, que era um grupo que dominava a literatura alemã na altura, e o Peter Handke escreveu um texto que está, aliás, traduzido nesta coletânea de teatro. E ele publicou então vários livros, dos quais eu só vou nomear os que tenho aqui, que não são todos, para o caso de estarem lá em baixo. Alguns são de ficção, um estilo muito próprio de ficção, de que falaremos. A Hora da Sensação Verdadeira, A Angústia do Guarda-Redes antes do penalti, que deu origem ao filme do Wim Wenders, Uma Breve Carta para um Longo Adeus, A Tarde de um Escritor, O Chinês da Dor, A Mulher Canhota, que foi também levada ao cinema foi realizado pelo próprio Peter Handke. Um título que eu gosto muito, Os Insensatos Estão a Extinguir-se. 2 pequenos ensaios, ensaio sobre o dia conseguido e uma abordagem da fadiga. E depois também teatro. Há vários, eu trouxe este que tem uma das peças mais famosas de Peter Handke, que se chama Gaspar, e também poesia, Poema à Adoração. Isto é para apresentar muito brevemente alguns dos livros dele. E daria a palavra ao João para lançar a conversa e depois nós vamos.
Boa tarde. As Pedro said, we are going to speak in English. Sorry if not speak German. But I think it's almost inevitable to speak about books and about films. Even if Peter Handke has written more books than made films. Anyway, my first question is about your first collaborations with Wim Wenders. It was in 1972 that Wenders directed The Goalkeeper's Fear of the Penalty Kick. And then you wrote in 75 The Wrong Move. Do you feel, when you think about this time, the 70s, that somehow the connection with film was important for your work as a writer? Or do you see those films only as a mere confirmation of what you have written?
First I have to apologize English is not my language, and when when I speak English or even French or ancient Greek, which I don't speak, I don't feel what I say and what I see. And this is a problem. And nevertheless, I have to. Paulo Branco forced me to be here, and so I have to try to answer your question. But I forgot. Yes, in the 70s, cinema was for me a kind of refuge, and my identity was not clear as a writer. Now I think it's clear but weak. My identity as a writer is clear but not very strong. But in the 70s, it was film. I never wanted to shoot, a very strange word, films. But I was a moviegoer. There's a famous, perhaps forgotten, but I don't know, American novel by Walker Percy, which is called The Moviegoer, and I translated it in German. And this was the story of this moviegoer was in another way my story. I was a spectator. I was somebody who found a kind of home in the movie houses, and never I had a kind of identity in script writing. It occurred by I don't know why it occurred, but it was not my work.
Mm-hmm. And in '78, I think, when you directed the Left-Handed Woman, what was the motivation to?
Well, there was no one else, and I wanted that somebody else would make the film, but I think it was the story was too special, and the last one who had to make it was me. Mm-hmm. And when I started to make it, I was really, after several 2 or 3 weeks, I got really enthusiastic about storytelling with rhythm and images, sound, and so on. But then after I had a real crisis of identity after I finished the film. And it took me 2 or 3 years to be reborn as a kind of writer. It was not an easy thing for me.
Can you explain why that happened?
No, I don't want to explain. I can explain, but not here.
Okay.
There's something in common in many Austrian films, even from the new wave of Austrian films. I don't know if you watch them, and in many writers such as Thomas Bernhard, and in the films of Michael Haneke, etc. There's always a very deep resentment against Austria. Austrian writers and Austrian filmmakers don't seem to like Austria a lot. How do you relate to that?
This is not true at all. I like Austria a lot. For my mother was Austrian. My grandfather, my grandmother, they were living in Austria. This is my country, and I love it. But it doesn't mean that you can't criticize Austria. The history of Austria is a very tragical and ambivalent story. But somebody like Thomas Bernhard and Michael Haneke too, I think it's easier to export negative and black paintings of Austria. Somebody who likes his country and nevertheless criticizes it and tells stories about the problem of the country and people. You can't, you don't know enough here. You don't. There are a lot of. There's a great epic writer who was called Heimito von Doderer. He came after Robert Musil in. He wrote two very epic and strange and poetic novels about Austria, about society, landscape, religion, politics, sex, to be sure. You don't know him here, but he's he's much deeper than Robert Musil as a prose writer. But no one, I think, perhaps, I don't know, perhaps I make a mistake, but no one has translated him in Portuguese. In English, I don't know. They made an effort in France to translate him, but it's very difficult to translate. Austrian language is very self-reflecting language. Austrian writers are not character. I come with my problems to speak English. Austrian writers are not so characterized with criticism against Austria, but with problems of language. One of my philosophers I really consider as a philosopher and at the same time as a poet is Ludwig von Wittgenstein. He treated the problems of language. What can you say? What can you say? What you can't say, cannot say, and this is our Austrian problem. A kind of ironic and tragic feeling about language. This is not Thomas Bernhard and Haneke special. This is Heimito von Doderer, Ludwig von Wittgenstein, Adalbert Stifter, and one dramatic writer whom nobody knows is Franz von Grillparzer, who was considered by Lord Byron as one of the biggest European dramatists, but he is not known, nowhere known. Even at the 19th century, when Lord Byron lived, he told he's such a big writer, but his name, Franz von Grillparzer, he never can become really famous. Goethe and Schiller is very easy to know as names. Even Adalbert Stifter or Musil, these are name you can export. Franz Grillparzer is very difficult to export.
In some of your more youthful texts and essays, you seem to be not especially interested in politics as a writer, but in a certain way, politics has followed you in. Does that change your idea of literature and of Austria?
No, politics didn't follow me.
Yeah, in the last couple of years.
Well, no, you make a mistake. What politics did follow me?
You have some kind of polemical statements.
But they followed me perhaps, but they didn't reach me.
No, okay.
You are right. I never was. I'm not a political being. I'm political in my village. When I meet the people of my village and the mayor of my village and the problems of the village, I know a lot. But I think the big politics, you have to be a killer in politics. Every politician is a killer. You have to be a killer. And I'm not Shakespeare enough to be interested in politics, politicians as killers. You should be Shakespeare to be enthusiastic about it. You have to, nevertheless, you have to be, and if you write, you have to stay enthusiastic all over your life. If not, you can't write. But nowadays, in politics, I can be, not even in anger, I can be enthusiastic. Excuse me.
Allow me to get back to this question of the resistance of language. When you speak about this resistance, you mean resistance for yourself when you write, or resistance because it's difficult to use this language to touch the others?
Yeah, the two of them. I think it's not the resistance. It's I expressed myself not in a good way. It's this kind of skepticism about language, which is Austrian nature. You can't really be right in a direct way. You have to make a joke. You have to make meanders like a river with language.
I would like to ask you that there's a very good text about you in this book by Sebald, and he writes that he characterizes your work in three aspects, which I found very appealing, and I would like to know your opinion about it.
I think there's a book by Jane Austen, and the female hero, they want an opinion all the time, the people, men, for instance, men. And this girl exclaims, "Oh, opinion, no opinion, please." But if you want to hear my opinion, I would like to imitate this woman.
Because I think it's a very good approach to your work, because
yeah, it's enough.
He talks about three aspects. It's precise language, silent catastrophes, and authenticity. Are these good words? When I read the essay, I thought that this is a good way to enter your work.
If you think so. No, he was a good man. Sebald. I didn't meet him, and it said that I didn't have the chance to meet this man. He died at 58 or so, in a car accident.
Of course, if you want to ask any questions, please, you are, of course, free to do it. Just waiting for these questions. One more, again, about cinema. You wrote Wings of Desire, also for Wim Wenders. It's a movie that it's not called exactly Wings of Desire in German. I think it means the sky over Berlin.
Der Himmel über Berlin, yeah.
Mm-hmm. This film and your writing, of course, was somehow for you an opportunity to rethink the heritage of Berlin and its history, or was it more a story about the possibility of angels?
I didn't write. I understand you, but I didn't write the story. Mm-hmm. This is the story Wim Wenders told. All I did was to write some litanies, dialogues, monologues. I was far away from Berlin and I sent him by letters dialogues, monologues, litanies, and this kind of poem which is called When the Child Was a Child, I think, in English. But Wim Wenders told the story about Berlin. I didn't have anything to do with Berlin. I only wrote the dreams, silent monologues, and this was all. And he used it for the city of Berlin, also for the historical context, which I avoided. I was not the scriptwriter. There was a scriptwriter, he used another scriptwriter for the story. I don't remember the name, Richard. They worked together. I didn't write the script.
Would you say, I don't know if you want to answer this question, but would you say that your perspective of Berlin would be rather different?
Well, at the moment when Wim Wenders had the project of the story about angels, I didn't know a lot about angels. And I was very skeptical about angels. But now I'm 20 years older, and I feel sometimes I feel protected by an angel, but not 20 years ago. Now I believe in my angel, but when I'm not good at all in life, my angel is leaving me. I don't pay attention to others, to myself, to nature, to colors, to dreams. I feel that my angel is not here. But at the moment when Wim Wenders had the idea, I found the idea not real and very difficult.
Okay, thank you.
There is always a lot of talk in literature and art and ideas about Central Europe, and of course most of important moments of contemporary history happened in Central Europe. But you said, I think in an interview, I don't know, that for you Central Europe was has a meteorological meaning. Mm. Does that mean that it's not that idea of Mitteleuropa doesn't?
It's a very good question, yeah. But like all good questions, the answer is difficult and normally not so good as the question. In Austria, even Slovenia, this is true. We are Central Europe. This is clear. And this landscape, the climate, everything is Central Europe. But in a certain moment of history, Central Europe became a political idea. And this, I was against the like you put it. I was against the use of Central Europe as a political idea, which became virulent at the beginning of the Yugoslavian war. And so I expressed myself how to put it, against the use of Central Europe as in a political, not only political idea, as the idea of war. This was the central idea, strange word, central idea, l'Europe centrale was the central idea of the Yugoslavian wars. We are not Balkan, our history is not Balkan history, we are in Slovenia, we in Croatia, we are Central Europe, and so we can leave Yugoslavia. And this made me skeptical, to avoid the word angry. I was the only one, nearly.
And you were, I think you already answered or didn't answer that question, but were you angry with the reaction you had when you expressed those kinds of opinions and the prize and so on, all that stuff that happened?
No. But this is my life, this is my destiny. And I'm very proud that I have, before I had no destiny, now I have a destiny, like Abraham Lincoln, Henry Fonda. No, it's not true, but it's a bad joke. But nevertheless, I think a writer needs a destiny. But I wasn't looking for a destiny, but suddenly it was there. And it is there, here, but not here perhaps, not here at the FNAC, but somewhere at the ocean.
When you use the word destiny, is it like a curse?
Oh no, it's happiness.
Okay.
It's reality. I need this kind of. I have to repeat. I was not looking for it.
Mhm.
I was not looking, but it arrived. And then now is now.
So, if anyone wants to ask any question in English, please.
I know that you are a great travel, and I know that you are a great travel. I can see this.
Great.
Great travel. Traveler. Sorry. I can see this in your in your last book, published in Madrid, and maybe you have in your mind some sound or some image that you can write. Maybe in all your travel, you have one image, one sentence that never write. You can say it about this.
I didn't really. My voice is not. I didn't really understand. You wanted to tell that there are sentences inside me that I
Yes.
wouldn't express. I hope so. A lot.
I have a little. Yeah. What do you think about?
You need a lot of silence inside. I have not enough. I have to admit it. Not at the moment, but after, when you will live and I will leave you, perhaps.
What do you think about the thieves' books?
About?
Thieves' books, stolen books. O que achas? O que achas das pessoas que roubam livros?
Book thieves. What do you think about people who steal books? That's a good question to make in a bookshop.
I never stole a book. Even in my life, I stole perhaps 2 or 3 times, but only apples. Fruits, I'm for fruit thieves. I'm against book thieves. I wanted to write a novel in my life. I never wrote a real novel in my life. I wanted to call it in German the Obstdiebin, the thief, female thief of Obst, fruits. But it's very difficult to translate the title. The Obstdiebin. It's a good title, but I never wrote a novel. Yeah.
Speaking about images, does it happen to you to decide to begin a book because of an image?
Yeah.
Can you give us an example?
I have to drink some wine to remember. Yes, the left-handed woman started with an image. I remember now. I was living near Frankfurt in Germany, perhaps 35 years ago. It was a very new lotissement of bungalows near a big forest, and there was a mountain behind the bungalows. These were all very new and very geometrical buildings, and all over the week the wives, the women lived alone, and me, I was living alone with my first daughter, and I went to a playground to play with my daughter there, and in the evening I saw all the bungalows. There were no curtains at all, and in all the kitchens there were the women preparing dinner alone, perhaps for the children too. And the playground was equipped with a kind of video supervision. And so I saw these women and saw the alone. And so the idea of the left-handed woman came by the image of women in the windows of this very new and lost lotissement. How do we call it in English? Settlement of bungalows. But it was not the only time that it started with an image.
You mentioned.
I think the goalkeeper story started with an image too. I was told the famous goalkeeper always had a yellow pullover to attract when there was a penalty. They told him you have to put a yellow pullover, and it started with a yellow pullover of a goalkeeper. The story. No, this is true, nearly. Not really, but nearly.
You talked about Wittgenstein, and certainly one of the main preoccupations with some modernist writers in the German language is the problem of language and the problem of for instance, Hofmannsthal, the problem of if you can say anything, if the words have any connection to the things, etc. If that is your preoccupation, and it's reflected in many of your texts, but somehow you manage never to have a writer's block. You have about 80 books, you have written plays, essays, short stories. Is that a paradox, or you don't think so?
You are right, this was my problem when I was young. It keeps to be a problem. Excuse my English, but I make as if it was not a problem. It were not a problem. One day I told myself you have to make wrong things in writing. For instance, a book like A Short Letter, Long Farewell, I think it's called in English. I started in a way. I came a lot from the Nouveau Roman when I was young. To avoid problems of language, I decided to start outside people, outside, not to become psychological at all, and to stay outside like this was a kind of method in the Nouveau Roman, in the French Nouveau Roman. And then I thought, for the Short Letter, Long Farewell, I told myself, I started in a way at the moment this was at the beginning of the 70s. You couldn't write this way. I think it's called the Jefferson Street is a quiet street in Providence, and so it goes on like this, and it was very old-fashioned to me. It not only old-fashioned to write this way. It sounded to myself also wrong, but in a very moment I told myself it's good that it's wrong. I think you have to start in literature. You have to start sometimes in a wrong way to end in a right way. A lot of writers today start in a right way and they end in a wrong way. And this is really a mystery of writing. Sometimes in your life of a writer, and it's really a life sometimes. It's worthy the word life to be a writer, a lifetime. And I'm very grateful to have been able to live as a writer, to work as a writer nowadays. And sometimes I wanted to say, I repeat, you have to to make something you against your opinion, against your thoughts of writing. And so I only wanted to answer your question. And so I decided to quit language, our Austrian writing problem, and to make as if language doesn't exist, as if there is no problem in language. And this was a kind of salvation for me too. But there is no salvation for a lifetime. Perhaps every 10 years you have to live a kind of very painful metamorphosis as a writer. Perhaps not every 10 years, but every 13 years or so, I don't know. But metamorphosis is very essential for writing. And metamorphosis is not only a natural thing, it's a kind of hell. It starts as hell, inferno. La Bocca dell'Inferno is in Cascais. And then you realize that it is not hell. But at the beginning you think it's hell.
I have a question. I wanted to thank you for an image that you have in several of your books. It's of people that all of a sudden, for no obvious reason, start walking backwards. I know you have that in the Angst des Torments, when at some point he just starts going backwards, and then you have it later in the Nachmittag eines Schriftstellers. I just always thought it was a very interesting moment whenever the character started doing that, and I don't know if you have anything to say.
Walking backwards, I think that keeps recurring in your books.
My character?
Walking backwards.
Não se ouviu muito bem, não sei se há um problema sonoro. Pelo menos aqui fazia um bocadinho de eco.
Is this a
Do
question?
you remember? Yeah, I mean, just what's that image that you have of when your characters start walking backwards, if there is anything?
Tell me my image.
I remember, well, I haven't read the books just this week, but I remember in the Angst des Torments that at some point the main character is in the hotel, and for no apparent reason he starts walking backwards. And I remember when I read the Afternoon of a Writer, Nachmittag eines Schriftstellers, that one character also does the same thing. I believe there's more. I don't know exactly. I remember those two very well in my head, and I just always thought it was a really wonderful image, but I don't know. I thought you maybe had something to say of if there's a reason why you have that image recurring in your works. Maybe there isn't. I don't know.
It's beautiful that you told not only to me this, but also to people. But I think it doesn't need any answer, what you told.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, no, it's enough, no? Let's go home.
Just one more.
Should I?
Sure.
Right. You have some texts for theater, some plays, and I would like if you could talk a little bit of your impulses to write theater and your opinion when you saw them staged. That's it, about theater.
It's not interesting. Huh?
I'm sorry.
My opinion about what I saw, I'm always afraid to go to theater to see my plays, but I'm not the only theater writer who has this problem. What concerns me, I like to read plays. Always when I was young, it was nowadays people don't read plays anymore. But when I was young, I studied law in Styria in Austria. All my joy was, instead of listen to the professors, was to read the plays of Ionesco, or of Beckett, or Tennessee Williams, or even Arthur Miller in another way, and Eugene O'Neill. I'm a play reader, I'm not a theater goer. I'm a not even a movie goer anymore, but I used to be a movie goer, not a theater goer, but a theater reader. And I don't read my own plays. There is no need to read them anymore.
Just one more question, please.
Good evening. I hope you answer my question.
Two more questions, sorry.
Okay. I was drawn here by mere curiosity because I don't know your work. I just finished reading my first book of yours, Die Angst des Tormann by Afmeta. And my question is, where did you get that idea for that metaphor of the angst for the goalkeeper, that metaphor for life? Where did you get that idea? Because it could be any other metaphor.
You're right. Yeah.
Thanks.
This was not an idea, but there are a lot of goalkeepers, when they were confronted with the title, they told they are never afraid. But it's only the title. I like the title. But I want to answer you in a short way. When I was a student of law, there was a professor of criminology, and he was telling about a murder once, about a young man who had strangled a young woman without any reason. He spent the night together, and then there was suddenly, I'm repeating the words of the professor when I was a student, there was a strange light in the room in the morning, and this strange light caused suddenly the young man strangled the woman. And I was so impressed by the storytelling of this professor, not only by the story, but also by the voice of this old professor, by the rhythm of his voice. And so 10 years after I think there was a rock group which was called 10 Years After. And 10 years after, I started to write the story of a man who strangles a woman. I was obsessed, not obsessed, it's not a word. I felt this man. I didn't identify with the murderer, but I felt the action, and then what happened after with this man. Okay.
Eu vou primeiro falar com o Sr. Handke em alemão e depois vou traduzir a minha pergunta, se acharem bem. Sim. Herr Handke, zwei Fragen. Zwei Fragen.
Why not five?
Die erste sind die Intervallos der Metamorphosen. Sind sie mit den Jahren länger oder kürzer? Os intervalos de metamorfoses, como ele disse, cada 10, 13 anos, minha pergunta é se com a idade são mais curtos.
They're longer.
Uma vez na sua vida tinha medo da palavra em si. Hatten Sie einmal Angst oder haben Sie Angst vor dem Wort an sich? Dass Sie mit dem Wort kämpfen, dass Sie Angst haben, dass Sie zögern. Das sozusagen wie in der Bibel steht und als erstes kam das Wort.
Ja, natürlich, ja. Aber jetzt habe ich beschlossen, keine Angst. So, I decided to not to be afraid anymore. But it's a fake. I was very afraid 30 years ago when I wrote a story, a long story, which is called Slow Homecoming. You don't listen to me.
Não, eu tinha medo. Peço desculpa.
I had a period in my life when every sentence was a problem of rhythm, of image, and it was a good period, but it was a period of very exhausting, and it was nearly a metaphysical. Why do I say nearly? It was a metaphysical period. But I don't accept it anymore. Yeah.
So one last question. It's about Robert Walser. Well, not about Robert Walser, but he's a writer who was not well known in Portuguese. There were no books by him. Now there are a couple in the English-speaking world. There are many of them.
Yeah.
And he was a writer who was unknown in many countries for a lot of years. He died. He was silent in 30 years in the madhouse. And what I want to ask you about that is, do you believe that in time or with time there is literary justice, that time is just to the good writers, is fair?
I think there's a German proverb, perhaps it exists in Portuguese too. Ihr Wort in Gottes Ohr, that what you are saying touches the ear of God, but I'm not so sure. There is justice, really justice. I don't know. I can't answer this question. But Robert Walser, he's a famous is not a word. He's a loved author, not by many, but by the readers who are what I dare to call real readers, who are the translators of mankind better than moviegoers, are readers who are bearing the tradition of what is the soul of man across the history. And for this kind of real readers, reality readers, a writer like Robert Walser will stay forever.
Okay.
Bom, podemos terminar. Muito obrigado a todos.
Obrigado. Thank you very much.